Good morning and welcome into the show. It is Daniel Ortman coming to you live from the Dreamaginate Sports Studios. It is Wednesday, January the 15th. Can't believe we're already halfway through this first month of 2020, but time is flying already this year. Hope you're having a good morning. Hope you enjoyed the show. Our first show back for the year yesterday with Sky Eddie Bruce. She's always a treat to have on the show. It's always a great conversation. And if you didn't get a chance to listen to that, I would encourage you to check that out. It was really, really good content and very informative. We were talking and discussing, and she was giving her thoughts on the relationship between parents and coaches and the club and players. Just some really good ideas there, some really good thoughts about how to build trust, how to shape those relationships in a positive way, have an influence in a positive way, and some really, really good ideas surrounding that. And she broke down, for example, parent behavior on the sidelines into three kind of main categories. And so you had the supportive, the distracting, and then the hostile parent. And so I would encourage you to kind of go back and listen to the middle portion of yesterday's show where the interview took place. If you are at all curious or interested in that conversation, because she had some really good ideas about how to improve the relationship with parents and the influence on players and player development. I think when we look at that relationship and when we look at everything that takes place in the context of player development, one of the biggest things that we need to get better at in terms of improving the American soccer culture is education. We've got to do, and when I say education, I don't mean like it has to be necessarily like classes. I'm not talking about education in the classical sense of courses and, every parent needs to take this $49 course and blah, 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 and you need to get a parent card. I'm not talking about that kind of stuff. What I mean by parent education is just, passing on kind of this, hand-to-hand, word-of-mouth education, and it's more organic in the way that we spread it, but I think we do have to be intentional about how we go about that education in the absence of building trust, in the absence of some of the things that Sky was talking about yesterday. We leave a void, and in that void it gets filled with something. And so that void has opened up the opportunity for, some really bad things to take place on occasion. And in most cases, just not maximizing the level of support and the kind of support that is needed. And so I just think it's always good to have a chat with her, have a good conversation about parents, and really, to me, it really points to a bigger issue, a macro level issue, which is making sure that you have an idea of what you want to do, a plan of what you want to do, and then getting that information into the right hands. And so I personally have always been, whether I've been dealing with a travel, club soccer environment, or it's a local community or recreational team. I've always tried to arm my players and their families with content that would help all of them kind of understand what we're trying to do, what we're trying to achieve. And so I typically always send out to my teams that I would coach in the past, and I've actually picked up a team to coach this spring after taking some time off over the last couple of years. And even with this team, sending out what I call a team manual, but your club could have an age-specific manual, or meaning, like a 7v7 or a 9v9 kind of, hey, here's our philosophy, club philosophy, here's how we're going to try to play, here's the kind of, it's basically, kind of a textbook or curriculum, in the same way that a teacher, is given, hey, here's the curriculum, here are the objectives, the overall objectives that, standards that you've got to teach to your students. It's that way with me as coaching. It's here are the standards that we are going to try to impart, the principles, the objectives that we are going to try to teach. And by getting that information into the hands of parents and into the hands of players up front, it gives everyone a sense of, direction. And hey, here's what we're trying to do. If you want to better understand why we're doing things in training and why we're doing certain things in matches, this is going to kind of help point you in that right direction. Not to say that we don't have conversations, not to say that training isn't important, but it's just another resource. And so I've always kind of done that with my teams, personally, in trying to arm them with those resources that allows the player and the parent to kind of understand, we all get on the same page here. Here's our objective. Here's how we're trying to play with the ball, without the ball. Personally, I'm a Barca fan first and foremost. If you watch the show at all, you'll see me in Barca hats and Barca t-shirts, as well as some of my Liverpool gear, because I like Liverpool in the Premier League. But Barca is my club first and foremost, above all. And at the heart of Barcelona is the Cruyff legacy that was revived and thrived under Pep. And in the last few years, I think it started under Enrique. We talked a little bit about this yesterday on the show. I think it started a little bit under Enrique, but definitely went full-blown under Valverde, this kind of departure from the core ethos and spirit of the club in terms of how the team plays. And so the club, sacked Valverde on Monday and then replaced him with Quique Setien. And the guy's never won anything, but the thing that he's known for is the way that he plays. And he's a Cruyff loyalist. He's a huge fan of Johan Cruyff, of Pep, and his teams always played beautiful football the way that they played, and that they're trying to get that core ethos back into the club, and we'll see how that goes. But in regards to each team in the U.S., our teams that we coach, whatever your philosophy is, I am a positional play. In Spanish, it's juego de posesión. It is a possession-based philosophy, but it's based on positional play, not just possession. And the distinction there, as I understand it and the way that I teach it, is positional play for me is how we support possession, how we obtain possession, how we get, keep, and maintain possession. So you have three kind of main core pieces to that. in terms of how you do that with your positioning. So, where you have people on the field, if you have a numbers advantage, and if you have better quality versus the opponent's weaker quality players, that those are three kind of easy ways to find advantages on the field. And so you're using your play of how your team is set up, structured, spaced, who's where, who's going and attacking who, as opportunities to have superiority. That's ultimately what you're trying to achieve, and you're using the ball to move them to give you the advantages, matchups, and space that you are seeking in order to be able to attack. That also sets you up for defense. Now, that's a bunch of like technical jargon, and if you're not a coach and you're watching this show and you're like, what in the world did he just talk about? The point is that is the philosophy that I love, that I teach, that I breathe. It is why I love the game. That type and style of play, a very Spanish style of play, Cruyff, Pep, etc. That is what I love about the game more than anything else. When you see that kind of football, it's just beautiful. It's mesmerizing, and I love it. How you play. Now, if I were to not explain some of those things up front to my players or parents, I could teach that stuff, and people do. But you're much more likely when it gets to the sideline behavior things to run into issues where a parent doesn't understand the concept, for example, patience in possession. So they see their son or daughter get the ball, have open space, and they're like, go, 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 go. Well, that might be the right choice, but it may not be the right choice. We may want to get the ball and settle down for a minute. La pausa. We may want to hit the pause button for a minute, and we may want to recycle possession, catch our own breath, make the other team chase us for a second, move the ball laterally side to side, not always feel the pressure that when we get the ball, we're trying to go vertical. Now, that's not to say that one way is right and one way is wrong, but in the context of positional play, our team philosophy, the way that we're going to train, is we're going to look to have patience in possession. We're not always going to look to go. Even when we have the space, we may take it, but we may not take it in a sprint. We may take it easy. Take the space, what they give us, but we're not trying to run every time we see 10 yards of open space. We are going to take it, but be calm, be patient. We want to be methodical. I want players that are confident and comfortable on the ball. I want them to boss the game. I want the ball 100% of the time. I get it's not possible, but we want to set our team up in possession and in recovery when we don't have the ball to try to be positioned in a way to get that ball back as quick as possible. So we have all these little nuggets, these little lessons, these little principles and objectives that we're trying to get out to our players, and arming our parents with that same information. Hopefully, in my experience in the past has been that they understand, hey, even if I don't fully get it, I know that they have a plan. And so I may not understand everything they're talking about, everything they're doing with my son or daughter, but I know they're trying to get this lesson out. So maybe I'm not going to give instruction because I don't really know if what I'm saying is correct, but I also have more peace and calm assurance that they are doing something, that there is a plan. And I think all of our teams in the U.S., all of our clubs in the U.S. would be better for having that kind of information. It doesn't have to be a 400-page textbook. It could be a one page. It could be a double-sided page. It could be 10 to 15 pages with some charts and graphs and formations and some drills or objectives, what have you. But the point is that if you have something you're working from, it's a guide. It's an overall vision. It also helps you as a coach to be able to distill down your philosophy. It helps you stay on track each and every training session so that you don't drift. It's real easy to kind of get into the thick of it. Maybe you're running late from your day job and you're like, oh crud, what am I going to do? I know what I'm working from. I'm much less apt to just go and do some random drills or some random things, or a night where I just waste time and let kids just, have one of those fun nights because I didn't do my job in planning things out. If you go into a season with an overall vision and plan, you're going to be much more apt to figure out even on a night-to-night basis what you need to do. And those things stack up over time. That's another way of arming parents with resources, and more importantly, arming your players with the resources to become ballers, to become better players, more confident players. So it was a great conversation yesterday. I really, really encourage you to go back and listen to it. If you're going to the coaches convention, the United Soccer Coaches Convention this weekend, I would definitely encourage you to connect with Sky at her booth. I believe she said she's going to be next. Her booth is next to the Huddle booth and the Soccer Parenting booth. That's the one you want to find. Find Sky. Say hey, I listened to the Daniel Wortman show and I heard you on it. I loved your interview, wanted to connect. Go to her session. I believe it's on Saturday. Find that in the guide. Check that out. She's got a lot of great ideas and great content. And more than anything, she is always willing and loves to help. And I think you could get a lot out of it. So if you're going to go, if you're going to be there, definitely recommend connecting with Sky if you haven't already. Our sponsor this half hour is Ductig Brand, DUKTIG brand.com. And if you've been living under a rock for the last few months and haven't checked out Ductig Brand, I don't know what you're waiting for, so don't wait anymore. 10% off of your next order. We'll be right back after this. This Wednesday, January the 15th. Can you believe we're already halfway through this month? I know I said it earlier in the show, but it's just Crazy time is flying by this month. First month of 2020, and things are just rocking and rolling. And I wanted to get to a thread that I saw over the holiday break, and I thought it was some notes that Coach Dan Wright, WRIGHT, that's Coach Dan Wright, at Coach Dan Wright, who posted a thread of some of the coaching stuff that he puts in his notes. And I wanted to kind of discuss some of these because I thought these were some really good things to ponder and to consider. Thought these were some really good things to be kind of a companion to that conversation that we began yesterday. And Coach Dan Wright, this thread was posted on December 23rd, 2019. So almost a month ago, about three weeks or so ago. And it was a really, really good link. I will, at the conclusion of the show, I will quote tweet this thread out, and feel like it definitely is worth taking a look at if you haven't already, to discover kind of some of these notes, different ideas. It's not one like concise manifesto at all. It's a collection of notes, but it's very, very helpful content. The first thing that he laid out is some notes he took about developing resilience, the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. And so he said how and when we offer challenge and support to individuals within our groups, to create an environment that promotes, encourages safe uncertainty. And so he has a graphic there that you will see if you haven't already seen this when we tweet. And then on the horizontal axis, you have support, low or high support. And so that what that does is it gives you basically kind of four quadrants. And if you think of this as kind of be your stagnant environment, and 9 o'clock back around to 12 o'clock is your unrelenting environment. And so in this kind of setup, where you want to be is a facilitative environment. So it's not enough just to create a very high intensity, high challenging environment. That is your unrelenting environment. But without proper support, it will often do the opposite effect of what you're after, which is it will, in the end, frustrate, discourage players and player growth and player development. Now, it may not in the short term, and it may not mean every player, but it means in the overall, you are setting up an environment where you might think, hey, I'm raising the intensity level. Hey, I'm making these things more focused. If you haven't done it in a supportive way, the long-term effects are still not going to give you the results that you're after. If you're in a low challenge environment with low support, that's where you see a lot of stagnation. Players aren't really getting better. Players are also not overly excited over time. It might be fun for a night, to kind of take your foot off the gas, but if you're not pushing your players and challenging your players, over time they're going to get bored and they're going to lose joy. It's not going to be that fun. It's going to it's just kind of silly, or it's kind of too relaxed. So that's another area that you have to take into context. And then the other aspect is some coaches will I think this is an important point when we look at low challenge, low support, and high support, meaning you're in a stagnant environment or you're in a comfortable environment. These kids are a lot smarter than we give them credit for. I mean, we've got toddlers operating iPads and iPhones. Their cognitive ability is much more advanced than we think. And if you think back to the kind of math and science that you were learning as a child and compare some of that to what these kids are learning, some of the computer skills that they're learning that some adults didn't even have access to a computer in school. Others was typing. Others were playing Oregon Trail. We don't really stop and consider how much these young players can comprehend. They can get so much. They can learn so much. If they are doing that in a school classroom environment, I really think there's a lot more that we can do to challenge them cognitively, from an education standpoint, terminology standpoint, things we're asking of them standpoint. That is not to say that we expect a 6-year-old to pass the ball the same way that a 12 or an 18-year-old is going to pass the ball. But the idea that they can't see the field, can't find space, etc., that all they can do is just stare at their feet or stare at the ball, I think we're doing a disservice to our players, that we don't actually think they can do more than they're capable of when they're capable of so much more. So sometimes you have a coach that goes over the top in support, and that's fantastic that you are being very supportive of your players and creating that kind of environment. But if you don't challenge, if on the challenge scale, it's so where you really want to be is a facilitative environment. It means it's a high challenge environment, but it's also a very supportive environment. When you have both of those, you have an opportunity for your best players to get better, for your middle of the pack players to get better, and for your weakest players to get better. I always talk about this with my parents, with my teams, with other coaches. I always try to coach to make the best players better. If I can create that environment, that's a facilitative environment. If I can create that environment where my best players are challenged and getting better, then that means that the rest of my players are going to have an opportunity to get better as well. But if I try to make the focus my weakest players, that means I'm lowering expectations, I'm lowering the challenges, and that means I'm going to have portions of a squad not getting challenged, whether that's the middle of the pack and my best players, or if it's, hey, I'm going to focus on kind of the middle of the pack and the weaker players. I'm going to leave the best players, unto themselves because they're already pretty good. I want to try to get the rest up to that level. And what you're going to find is there's always a shifty. Rather than telling everybody to juggle to 5, you get everybody to juggle based on their personal level at the time. So there's always things that you can do. There's always expectations. A great example of this is I had a player that when he came to me, he on a team I used to coach several years ago, he was not a very good player at all. Had a terrible first touch, didn't know anything tactically about the game, just wanted to learn. He was extremely raw. And he started coming into training, joined the group, definitely our weakest player. And we didn't stop everything that we were doing with everyone else and just try to get his level up. We kept coaching and trying to push our best players. But in that environment, he started to improve. And he started to get better, Now, he was never going to be our best player, but he made drastic improvements to his quality of play over those two years. And one of the things that we tried to do in terms of how do you create a facility, make sure that your best players as well as your weaker players are getting better. For us, one of the things that we did is if we were in a rondo, for example, and this player was in the middle and he was in his defensive positioning and in his hustle was able to win a ball from two of our better players, we would hype him up. We would celebrate him. Now, that would do a couple things. Number one, that would give him confidence. He would feel like really good about himself, that he had a moment of success that built him up. So that was one area. We were being supportive. We were that he was one of the weaker players and that they lost the ball, that they lost possession to a weaker player. And so that made them want to redouble down and focus their efforts on getting better. Not anything that we said to them, not anything that we made fun of. So, for example, what we would say in that situation when this player would win the ball, it's like, great job, dude, great job. Way to hustle, way to go after it. We didn't say anything to those other players. That was an internal response from those best players, is why they were the better players, because they were always driving themselves, pushing themselves to be better. And when they saw this other player that wasn't as good as them has some success against them, they didn't like it. And so that is a way that you can create a facilitative environment where you're pushing your best players, but you're also helping support and push your weaker players. And that is I think a great way to look at creating the proper environment. Another note that Dan Wright put out is the relationship coach. He had some recommended reading here, Inside Out Coaching by Joe Ehrman, Ehrman. And this has a similar quad setup. So if you're going 12 o'clock to 3 o'clock on a clock, you have authoritative, the coach knows and the coach cares. So your horizontal graph here is cold to warm, and your vertical axis. So they're very warm, they're very supportive, but they don't have control. They're not running a tight ship. There's probably a lack of discipline. So they're just the fun coach. Short term may be great. Long term, you get back into that area we were talking about before, where that creates just a comfortable environment, but you're not really pushing your kids. You're not really maximizing the opportunity for development. 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock, you have a cold coach, a lack of control coach. That coach is neglectful. The coach doesn't care or know how. So anything goes, they're not paying attention to you. And I can't tell you the number of times I've seen coaches, you walk by a session, they're not watching the players, they're on their phones, they're having a conversation or they're checking Twitter. They're not really locked in. The players are over there kind of doing their thing, and they're there as a lifeguard. They're sitting on the side, kind of not paying attention. If there's some crisis that goes on, they'll step in and intervene, but they're not really active. They're not being proactive. They're not really running a session. They're letting players just kind of do whatever they're going to do, and their body language is saying, I'm not all in. That's the neglectful coach. From 9 o'clock to 12 o'clock is the militant coach. That's a coach that has full control, but doesn't have a really good relationship with their players. A militant coach is the coach's boss, but he scares me to death. He's a drill sergeant. So it's, you're doing this, and this. But in order to have that kind of environment, if you marry these two kind of notes that Dan Wright laid out and overlay these to have a facilitative environment, that means you need a coach who is authoritative. That is a coach that knows what their objectives are, what they're trying to do, what they're trying to teach, what their philosophy is, what the plan is. But they're also a coach that cares. They're passionate. They're focused. They're locked in. They're supportive. So you want a facilitative environment. You need an authoritative coach. Coach who knows and a coach who cares. So if you want an idea, am I creating the right environments for my players? As coaches, this is a good thing to look at, because if I'm a coach and my tendency is to get them started on something and then I can distract myself by just getting on my phone or turning and just having a conversation with another coach, then I'm a coach that is probably either permissive or neglectful. Now, it may not be for the entire session, but it certainly would mean that we're not maximizing our opportunity to have a facilitative environment. So, as coaches, if we want to create the right environments, we've got to look ourselves in the mirror first. We got to say, okay, hey, am I doing my best? Am I giving my best effort? Am I focused? If you're a club coach and you're a paid coach, like this is something you do for money as a living, to me it's even more important beyond this thing. It's to me, because if somebody's paying me, I feel a duty and obligation, guilt, even that I've got to do a job, whatever that is in life, right? So as coaches, if you're a club coach and you're getting paid to do what it is that you're doing, then to me, we should be really focused, supportive, excuse me, a coach who knows, a coach who cares, that authoritative coach that is creating the right environments, that's creating the right opportunities to really be able to maximize the development of our players. And I think that's such a big deal. I think it's so important. And I don't think it's something focused on enough. How we create environments and what is the responsibility of a coach in creating that environment. In terms of creating environments, our sponsor this half hour is Charity Water. Charity Water creates the opportunity for people around the world that do not have clean drinking water to kind of start with that first foundational step of healthy living, healthy village, education. Everything starts with the ability to get access to clean water. If you don't know about Charity Water, check them out at charitywater.org. We'll be right back after this.
No one, no man, no woman, no child should ever have to drink right now to every single person on earth. And when you can bring water into communities, it truly transforms them. It changes everything. Or you could know that you'd made a difference. You could know that you had truly impacted the life of a family, of a community, of a region. There was either clean water or there wasn't. We believe in a world where every single person has clean and safe water to drink, and we will continue fighting until that happens.
back to the show. Thanks for tuning in on this Wednesday. We've been going through today some notes that I came across. It was a really good thread from Coach Dan Wright. He posted this on December the 23rd, 2019. If you didn't find those at the time, we will post those in a link on Twitter after the show in the thread underneath our show. And in doing that, I would encourage you to pick up things usually pretty quick, very similar to a classroom. And so you're going to have those kids cognitively, intelligence-wise, focus-wise that they want to be there, they want to learn, they're locked in. And you're going to have other kids who are just, you're hoping that their head is on Earth somewhere, because they're like ultimate space cadets. And so you're trying to figure out the balance, right? So to me, I think it's a good note to notice the positive first, and also pay attention to who are your learners, because they can help you with your other players as well. Another thing is to check behavior against expectations. So in other words, if you have a standard, if you want to run a good quality session and you want kids paying attention, working hard, giving effort, being the big Pep Guardiola fan that I am, one of the famous speeches that he gave when he first took over Barcelona in 2008 is he said, look, you're going to miss a penalty kick. You're going to make a bad pass. You're going to make mistakes. You're human. I don't expect you to execute perfectly. Perfection is not expected. It's not going to happen. But if you don't give me 100% effort, it's going to happen. That's fine. It's fine if, and this is the caveat, I can tell that you're giving me your effort. If you tried, if you gave your best at that time, you might get them next time. Maybe you learn something about the defender. Maybe you learn something about yourself. The most important thing is effort. And in that moment, what does effort look like when you make a mistake in a 1v1? Is it to hang your head, to let the player go, or is it to immediately get back in and try to win that ball back? Or to slow down the counterattack? That's giving your best effort. That's moving on to the next play. And so as coaches, we should celebrate and expect that if that is our expectation. And then we want to check that that's the behavior we're getting from our kids. How many times do you see a kid make a mistake, they hang their head? They may hear their parents yell at them from the sideline. How could you do that? Instead, maybe if our expectation is we want 100% effort, we don't expect perfection, we don't expect you to play perfect games and never make a mistake, never make a bad pass, never mess up in a 1v1, we should highlight, we should focus on giving the effort, celebrate the attempt, try it again, go at it again, play the next play, etc. And then at the same time, check that behavior, make sure that we are creating environments for our players in training where they're not hanging their head, but they're moving on to that next play, that we're teaching our parents, hey, we don't expect them to get it right every time. We just expect their effort. And if we get that, we'll keep getting better. Another thing is try nonverbal intervention. So if you see a kid that gets down on himself, it may just be walking up behind him and, giving him a chance. So if we want our behavior to line up with our expectations, we also need our words to line up with our expectations. So are we saying the right things that gives our players a sense of confidence? That they can make mistakes as long as they are trying. If they're giving effort and they're working really hard, we celebrate that. So are our words backing that up? In the heat of the moment when the kid makes a mistake, Are you asking the player, why did you do that? Are you scolding them? Don't do that. Or are we celebrating their effort? Maybe it's a positive reminder. Hey, next time, have you thought about this? So how we talk to them, what we say to them, is it lining up with the expectations we're setting? Another note is delay, don't jump in. Sometimes you need to let players go through the fire. Let them learn for themselves. Don't feel like you have to intervene and micromanage every action and reaction. So you set an overall expectation. You make sure that your behavior and their behavior is lining up with expectations. You make sure that your coaching points, your words are backing up those expectations, but don't feel like you have to overcoach. You don't have to jump in. Allow for natural consequences. Like if a player loses a ball 1v1 and he doesn't give effort to get back, and the other team scores, you elite on the next play. Just stay locked in, play the next play. If you make the mistake and then you don't stay locked in, so you're not giving effort now we're compounding failure. Now we're taking one mistake, we're turning it into 2, into 3, into 4. And sometimes the best way for a player to understand that that's actually what's happening is to let a play out. Let them see it. Let them experience it. And then finally, the last note in that is sometimes it's a matter of closure. Address it and close it. Sometimes it's just a quick chat. It's just saying, hey man, I noticed that every time today in training that you didn't beat your guy 1v1, you got frustrated and you hung your head. And we've talked about it before that you got to just play the next play. It doesn't matter. Stay locked in. Just keep giving effort. You keep working. It's gonna pay off. You're gonna get there. You're gonna beat them 1v1 eventually. But if you compound your mistakes and you mess up your 1v1 and then you hang your head and you don't help the team and you don't help yourself, then it gets worse. So you have that little bit of a conversation, a little reminder. You pump them back up. And you move on. These are little coaching moments, coaching points. It's about leadership. It's about communication. And I think those are things that we have to look at when we're looking at coaches. The last note here that I'll do on the show today, and you can go through the rest of these, is early matures versus late height differential. You're talking about 20, 25, 30, 40 pounds of weight differential. And that's just in one single age group. So you have to keep that in mind. What am I dealing with? Who am I working with? Just because a player is bigger, faster, stronger doesn't mean they're always going to be bigger, faster, stronger. This is why I think the focus of youth development in American soccer, and when I travel to Europe, it's something I see that is the big difference. It's not physicality. If anything, at the younger ages, American youth soccer is on par or better than their overseas counterparts when it comes to the bigger, faster, stronger component. Where the difference is and where you really start to see it play out is once these players get into those high school ages, the cognitive difference, the tactical understanding difference, the psychosocial aspects difference, and especially the technical difference really start to play out. And so they get into environments that are more and more challenging where the bigger, faster, stronger differences start to diminish. They're not near as a factor in global football. Usain Bolt tried, and he couldn't make it as a professional footballer after kind of giving up, retiring from running track, the fastest man on the planet. He tried. What was missing? He was faster. He was bigger. He was quicker. Could run for days. Could outrun most soccer players. What he didn't have was, on a professional ability and level, the technical skill, the tactical understanding, all of those aspects that separate the best players from the average players, from the weaker players, because physical no longer is the difference. So as coaches, I think that's a really good reminder and thing in place to kind of leave off for the day. Just wanted to let you know, if you've been watching the show today, maybe you've been watching, joining us for the first time on Twitter. We have now been able to get that up and running, as well as with YouTube and LinkedIn, Facebook, as well as Vimeo. So we are continuing to roll out different ways, different channels.